Well, we're skyrocketing through the book of Hebrews. If you looked in your notes, you'll see we're going to cover one verse today and one guy, but he has a big history. So we're going to add some things in Genesis talking about Noah because he's a very much of a hero of faith that we're looking at in Hebrews chapter 11. Now, make sure I get there. Well, I'm in the wrong week. I'll get there though quickly. If you haven't counted, there are 10 heroes of faith listed in and their accomplishments by faith. And we've already learned that it is impossible to please God without faith. So that should come through loud and clear. We trust Him by faith. We honor Him by faith. If we don't, we can't please Him. And here in Hebrews 11, there are 8 men and 2 women, plus 6 others that are named, but it doesn't talk about their accomplishments. And the writer adds the prophets. Well, that's a broad list right there. And there were 4 major prophets, and there were 12 minor prophets. The only distinction between the two is they were bigger books. But there were others that didn't write books that aren't even mentioned here. So far we've covered Abel and Enoch. We got a long way to go, but next up is Noah, in which there is more written about in the New Testament, not just the Old Testament, in the New Testament than any of the others except 2, which would be Abraham and Moses. And why not? He was the second father of all humanity after Adam, with a wife who was not named in Scripture. But actually the Jews had a name for her in the Madrath. It was Naamah. Now, I've never known a lady or a woman named Naamah, but you may have. But she was a daughter of Enoch, by the way, according to the Jewish writings. Before we begin Noah's story of faith, I'd like to begin with a question. Now, I think you know the answer to that, but how would you answer a person that wasn't a Christian or wasn't familiar with the Bible? How did God speak to Noah? How did He speak? Was there handwriting in the sky? Was there some way He
spoke vocally?
Yeah, just like I would speak to you or you would speak to me. Now, He spoke the same way to Moses. In fact, you remember that Moses asked to see God's face. So how did He speak to him face to face if he couldn't see His face? Well, He was veiled in human flesh because the one that was speaking to all of these was the pre-incarnate Christ. In other words, Christ taking on flesh before He came to this earth. And He was the one actually speaking to all of these as face to face. But it says He spoke to Moses face to face as a friend. In Exodus 33, verse 20. God spoke to His Old Testament saints as the pre-incarnate Christ, as we said, and in Genesis 18, you remember there were 3 men coming up to Abraham's tent. He was sitting on the outside, and it said that one of them was the angel of the Lord. So if somebody asks you how God spoke to them, and you don't want to tell them it was the pre-incarnate Christ, they would say, what are you talking about? Just tell them it was an angel, through an angel. But that's who it was. One last thing about Noah's faith. You think things are going bad today? Well, here's what it said, and you're probably familiar with this. I'll read it out of Genesis 6:5. It says, "Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." And that's pretty bad. We think it's bad today, and some places it's really bad. But every thought, every intent of their heart, and all other than Noah's family, was evil. That's pretty bad. So let us look at Noah's faith. It was all encompassing in verse 7, which is the only verse we'll cover here. "By faith, Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with godly fear, prepared an ark for the saving of his household, by which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is according to faith." I'm going to read you a passage that Warren Wiersbe wrote. He's one of the commentators I follow, of several, but he kind of capsulizes Noah's faith. It says, "Noah's faith was involved in the whole person. His mind was warned of God. His heart was moved with fear, and his will acted on what told him to do." Since nobody at that time had ever seen a flood, or perhaps even rain at that time, Noah's actions must have generated a great deal of interest and probably ridicule as well. Noah's faith influenced his whole family, and they were saved. It also condemned the whole world, for his faith revealed their unbelief. Events prove that Noah was right. Jesus used this experience to warn people to be ready for his return in Matthew 24:36 through 42. In Noah's day, the people were involved in their everyday activities of life and completely ignored Noah's witness, according to 2 Peter 2:5. So let's look at Noah's working faith. We're going to go back and look at conditions on the earth in Noah's day. And first of all, Noah is seen as reviewing the earth, or God is, rather. We're going to go back to Genesis 6, 11 and 12. If you want to follow along with there, we'll spend more time in Genesis, obviously, than we are in Hebrews. But here in verses 11 and 12, it says, "The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. So God looked upon the earth, and indeed it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth." Now, everywhere God looked, he saw corruption. The violence and unrestrained evil he saw were flaunted and applauded, like it is today. Looks a lot like today, doesn't it? I always go back to Isaiah 5:21 when I think things are bad. And some 2,700 years ago, here's what Isaiah said. He said, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and prudent in their own sight." Sounds like a little bit like today as well. The sins that produced the flood are again upon us and calling for God's judgment today. God is seen revealing his wrath. Let's look at verse 13 of Genesis chapter 6. And it says here, "And God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth." When it is written that the end of all flesh has come, the word used here means to cut off. And God was preparing to cut off all living things from the earth. The proportions of the ark were exact. We're going to look now at Genesis 6:14 to 16. It says, make yourself an ark of gopher wood. I think in the NIV it says cypress, which is it's not a hard wood to work with, but it is a hard wood. Make rooms in the ark. God didn't tell us how many rooms, but it had to take a lot of rooms because there were some fierce animals on that were all eating each other if you didn't have them in different rooms. And cover it inside and outside with pitch. That's a very strong glue. And this is how you shall make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, its width and its cubits and its height 30 cubits. You shall make a window for the ark, and you shall finish it to a cubit from above, and set the door of the ark in its side. You shall make it with lower, second, and third decks. Very specific. The instructions that were given to Noah for the construction of the ark were precise, and God expected Noah to follow his instructions precisely. The record shows Noah did exactly as God ordered. You know, that's what it takes to have a strong faith. When God speaks to us through his word, we follow his word exactly. We don't pick and choose. A lot of us say, well, some of this is too hard. Well, God wouldn't have given it to us if it was all that hard. We do it exactly as he ordered. Let's look at the promise of judgment in Genesis 6:17 and 18. And behold, I myself am bringing floodwaters on the earth to destroy from under heaven all flesh, in which is the breath of life. Everything that is on the earth shall die. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall go into the ark, you and your sons, your wife, and your sons and your wives with you. God promised to save all who believed in his word. But just as today, they had to be a response to the invitation to trust God. You know, Paul gave us a very easy instruction of how to be saved in Acts 16:31. It's simple. He says, believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and thou shalt be saved. Now, the word believe is a very strong word. It means to trust in, to rely upon, to basically bet your life on it. Remember Groucho Marx used to say, you bet your life? That was the name of his program. You bet your life on it. There was no precedent for what God was asking, and it had not rained before. They were simply asking to trust God. Now, it took them 120 years to build the ark. So it was 120 years that Noah had to witness to the world in that day. Now let's think about that for just a minute. They came from all inhabited earth, I believe. And by the way, it is estimated, now this is a guess, but the experts estimated there were about 500 million people on the earth when the flood came. That's a lot of people to destroy. But they were not scattered through the whole earth. In fact, Hugh Ross, who believes in the long earth, believes that only about a quarter of the earth at that time. He uses Job and Psalms and a lot of the other creation Psalms to come up with that, but it doesn't mean that the water didn't cover the whole earth. It simply means the whole earth wasn't completely populated with people in that particular time. Now, why didn't he call it a big boat or a ship? It was really big. In fact, I'm told there's one in northern Kentucky that I see some heads shaking, that is the exact replica of the ark. Some of you have seen it. Haven't seen it, but you heard of it. Well, you should go see it. It's the same actual size of the ark. Now, why didn't he call it a big boat or ship? By the way, they wouldn't have known what that was either. They didn't have any boats or ship. But it was called an ark. You know what an ark means? Ark? It means something that affords protection and safety. Think about that. That's what he was telling them he was building. I'm building something for you that affords protection and safety for what is coming. Remember the Ark of the Covenant? That was another name of ark. It affords protection and safety because God resided inside of that ark. The plan of salvation was exact in 7:1. Then the Lord said to Noah, "Come into the ark, you and all your household, because I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation." The gospel invitation was that given to Noah was the word "come." That's a pretty interesting word because this is the first time that this familiar word is found in the Bible. It is found elsewhere some 600 times in the rest of the Bible. It is the word at the beginning of the Bible here and at the end of the Bible in Revelation 22:17. Let's look at this. God is still extending an invitation at the very end before everything is destroyed in the earth. He says in verse 17, "And the Spirit and the bride say, 'Come,' and let him who hears say, 'Come,' and let him who's thirst come. Whoever desires, let him take the water of life freely." 3 times at the end of the Bible it says "come." That should be a verse used for an invitation in the church, don't you think? At the end of the word, it comes out 3 times. And by the way, Billy Graham's song that they all sang at every revival he had at the end was what? "Just as I am," meaning just as I am, come. And by the way, Greg Laurie took that up because he had Crystal Lewis sing another song at the end of his, and it was "Come just as you are," taken from Isaiah 55:1. The performance of Noah was exact. Let's get back to Genesis. Chapter 7, verses 5 and 7. "So Noah with his sons, his wife, and his sons' wives went into the ark because of the waters of the flood." I forgot 5. "And Noah did according to all that the Lord commanded him." Noah's spiritual character and fellowship were expressed and proven in practical obedience. Nothing can make up for this, practical obedience. All of our privileges, opportunities are intended to be expressed in daily obedience. That's why my favorite song in the songbook is what? "Trust and Obey." I love that song. There's not 2 more important words in the entire Bible or the entire world. Trust and obey. This is the standard by which Noah lived. Noah did not pick and choose among God's commands as we often do, because we think, well, I can't do that anyway. But he did according to all that God said. And that's what we should think about when we're reading the Bible. Am I doing this? Does this apply to me? Am I doing as God has said? And just as the ark was God's plan of salvation for the generation of Noah, Jesus is the only plan of salvation for us today. Now, people don't like to hear that today. They think, well, there must be other ways. I'm a very intelligent person. Don't insult my intelligence and tell me there's only one way. Can you imagine if God said there were 7 or 10 or 20 ways? What a scrambling that would be, how ridiculous that would be. He said there's one way, it's simple. And just as the ark was God's plan of salvation, again, Jesus is our plan. Noah's faith was established on grace. Let's look at 6, verse 8. "But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord." Every time I read that verse, I think, I hope I found grace in the eyes of the Lord. In the midst of all this depravity, Noah found grace in God's eyes. By the way, grace is totally undeserved, as you know. If you think you deserve grace, you haven't got it. It is unmerited favor freely given by God. Now, Noah was not a godly man because he came from a long line of godly men. And by the way, he did. His grandfather was Methuselah, and his great-grandfather was Enoch, and that goes all the way back. So he came from a long line. But he was a godly man because he discovered the grace of God and acted on that grace by faith. Now, let me ask you something. Ephesians 2:8 says, by grace are we saved through faith. Grace is God's part. There's nothing we have to do with that. Now, faith is our part. Let me tell you why I say that. In Romans, it says God has given every person a measure of faith. In other words, every person has enough faith to be saved. But you got to act on that faith. So our part is to act on that faith. All of us know someone in our families, extended families, who are not saved, that are very close to us. And we pray for them and we talk to them, hopefully. I've got a neighbor who has a brother who loves him so much. He's one of the best guys I know. And I pray for him all the time because he doesn't know the Lord. And I said to him, how do you pray for him? I pray that he be saved. I said, you ever tried praying that he would have grace, God's grace, and that he would have enough faith to be saved, and that he would be convicted by sin? He said, let me write that down. I want to get it right. And I said, well, those are all the elements that could bring him to God. But the first thing is conviction. If a person is not convicted of their sins, they're not going to get saved. That's number one. Noah's faith was effective in his family. Let's look at verse 10. And Noah begot 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. From these 3 sons, every person on this planet has descended, according to Genesis 9:19. You know, there's 7 people that we can say for sure we were all extended. They're all the family that we were from. Everybody on the planet. Let's think about those 7. Adam and Eve. There was Noah and his 3 sons and his wife. 7 people. Every one of us came from one of them. Note that Noah's faith was not transferable. Wouldn't you wish that your faith you could just transfer to your children, transfer to your friends, say, God, I'm transferring my faith? It doesn't work that way. He did not get his faith from the grandfather, who was Methuselah, nor did his children become godly because he transferred his faith to them. But here's the deal. Faith is contagious. It's contagious. If you have faith in God, people around you will know it. Noah's sons and their wives, by faith, went into the ark with him. He may have not had one convert from the world, but he had 7 in his family. By the way, a woman came up to Dr. Truitt, who was a great evangelist many years ago, and he said, Dr. Truitt, God has called me to preach. He says, how many children do you have? She said, well, I have 7. They're all here with me. He said, isn't that wonderful? God called you to preach and he gave you a congregation. Noah's faith was evident to his neighbors. Verse 9. This is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a just man, a perfect in his generations. It says Noah walked with God. The faith of Noah was not unknown to the world around him. Noah walked with God. Now, I'm going to give you an illustration. It may not be a good one, but Bob Vanderzag told me that he has some neighbors that are Muslim. Is that right? He's also told me they're a great family and that they are as good a neighbors as you could have, right? Now, he's not a good Muslim because Muslim, according to the Quran, you either convert or kill. Now, Bob's alive and well here today. So now I think somebody took to his face. Well, that was his dermatologist. That wasn't his Muslim neighbor. But the fact is, his neighbor recognized that Bob is a good guy. He's a man of faith. Now, I'll tell you one other story. This is probably 2 years ago, but we have a lot of wonderful neighbors in Monarch Beach where we live, but we got some kind of bad dudes and women that live in there too. And there's one bad dude that causes Tony a lot of problems because she's on the architectural committee and he's already trying to do something that's not according to the law. Well, I ran into this guy there's a restaurant down by the beach. I ran into him there one day a couple of years ago. I recognized him because he's known by just about everybody. And he says, "Hey, Sonny, come over here." I've never been introduced to the guy. I've never met him before. "Yeah, I want you to meet my sister. She's from Vermont, and she's just like you." I said, "What do you mean?" "Well, she's a Christian." He says to his sister, "You should go down to that church on Crown Valley. That's where he teaches." And I'm flabbergasted because this guy's got a bad reputation. But at the same time, faith is contagious. I got to find my place here now. Okay, we'll catch up. Faith can be seen in 3 different facets of his life. Let's take a look at those. Number 1, Noah worked by faith. He was a just man. Righteousness is a product of faith. Hebrews 11:7 says that Noah, an heir of righteousness, which is according to faith. Number 2, Noah witnessed by faith. It says he's perfect in his generations. When the Bible says that Noah was perfect in his generations, it means that he lived in a morally corrupt world and was not corrupted himself. Now, sometimes it's hard to do because you know you're going to get ridiculed in different places, but Noah did it. We can do it as well. Noah's lifestyle was a witness to his wicked generation. But he also know that Noah's words were a witness as well. Let me stop here and say, can you imagine that time of 120 years when Noah's building the ark? He only had his 3 sons to help him. Nobody else was helping him. It's no wonder it took 120 years when you see the dimensions of that ark. But people would come by and they would say, "What are you doing?" "Well, I'm building an ark." "What's an ark?" "Well, it's going to be a big boat because it's going to rain and we're going to have a flood." You imagine them, it never rained before. And they'd say, "You're a fool." So the guy would leave and he'd tell somebody else, "You got to go down there and see this huge boat," or whatever it is, I don't know what to call it, that Noah's building. And so the word spread around all over the place and he got ridiculed more and more and more. But that was his testimony for 120 years. It's just ridiculous how they couldn't believe something was going on there. Okay, where was I? Noah's lifestyle was a witness to the wicked generation, but we also know that Noah's word here was a witness as well, for Peter refers to Noah as a preacher of righteousness. Remember I said there was a lot written about Noah in the New Testament? Bringing in the flood, the world of the ungodly, 2 Peter 2:5. Noah was completely dominated by his faith. just as the iniquity and of his contemporaries dominated their lives. So Noah's faith dominated every part of his being. His mind, his heart, and his will were in sync with his faith in God. Number 3, Noah walked by faith. It says Noah walked with God. The idea of Noah walking with God is that of a friendship and fellowship with God, and it is noteworthy that such a position was possible amidst the very difficult everyday life that Noah had to lead. It meant that Noah had to be courageous and independent in his thinking, which we have to be with those that are corrupt around us, because no one else was walking that way. In a sense, he was walking alone in the world. Now, we have cities in this country that are pretty bad shape. They're pretty corrupt. Even the mayors are starting to acknowledge that their cities have gone the wrong way. You know, they talk about New York and Chicago, but you know, LA, not much a cut above. It's there as well. And it has to be difficult. And I'm hoping that a lot of them, more of them will come to light. But you know, even here in Orange County, you know, we're kind of somewhat isolated here. But El Niguel Country Club wouldn't allow an Easter sunrise service on its campus. Now, the assistant general manager there, who's a Christian, she asked Ty, first of all, if he would conduct a sunrise service there. You probably heard about this. And he said, of course. And all of a sudden, one of the board members, they got irritated about, oh, there's separation of church and state. There is no such thing in the Constitution. You knew that, right? It came from a letter from Thomas Jefferson. That's all it was. But they were quoting this separation of church and state. We can't have it here. So even Orange County, which may be the best of the bunch, still has its corruptness. All right, I'm going to close with this. Noah's walk by faith is demonstrated best when we realize that God told Noah to build an ark, which had never been built before, because of rain, which had never been seen before, and the ridicule that came about because of that from his neighbors, took a real living faith based on a relationship with God for him to make it to the end. And that's all I got to say about Noah. Search me, O God, and know my heart today. Try me, O Savior, know my thoughts, I pray. See if there be some wicked way in me. Cleanse me from every sin and set me free. You did a good job. God bless you all.